role the Actifio connector plays during a mount. So, as you can see at the moment, my system here is running with the expected disk, the expected file systems. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a mount. And at the end of this mount, I'm going to show you what the connector actually achieved. So I'm doing a mount to my source drive, so source host. Kick off the mount. It will take, in this case, about 1:20. All right, so my mount is completed, ran for 1:15. Now, if we go and have a look at the consequences, remember, this was my pre. If I do a DF, I can now see that I have two mount points that didn't exist before. And if I do an LSPV, let's try that again. If I do an LSPV, and I'll just drag this up to make it easy to see, you can see that I now have an additional volume group that I didn't have before. And if I do an LSVGFS, you can see that that volume group has mount points. All of this was created by the connector automatically. So I didn't need to do any of the work such as config manager, mounting volume groups and so on, recreate volume groups. All of this was done automatically. Now, what we can do is we could tear this down and actually do this manually. So first up, what I'll do is I'll do an unmount. So I've done an unmount, and the unmount has succeeded. Now on the AIX side, what we can see is that those file systems that were there are gone, and that the volume group that was there is gone, and that the disks that were there were gone. So in other words, all of the constructs that were created, the VGs, the H disks, the mount points, all of them were torn down when we did the unmount. Now all of this is being done by the UDS agent. So what we can do, just to prove a point here, is I can go and talk to the UDS agent, confirm it's running, and then I could stop it. Now, the reason I'm doing this is I want to show you what you would need to do manually instead of the UDS agent. So, what we're going to do is we're going to run another mount job. And again, we see we're mounting back to the same host. Hit mount. Now we'll wait for about 1 minute for the mount to complete. Now, one thing you notice straight away is that the mount ran for only 25 seconds. That was less than half the time. Now, the reason is that there was no connector work. So when we slip over to the system, none of that work has been done. So what we have to do is we have to do it manually. So first up, we do config manager. Now, one thing I'm going to point out is that the next thing you're going to see is going to be a little bit scary. And the reason for that is that we have the DB2 data volume group currently online, and you can see its PVIDs right here. These are the IDs of each disk. What we've discovered is 4 more disks with identical PVIDs. Now, this isn't a defect or a bug. This is standard behavior by by AIX, because we have a volume group that's in band and we're snapshotting it. We've prevented exactly the same snapshots back to the same system. So it's seeing exactly the same disks twice. This is not a good situation, but it's relatively easy to clean up. So there's 2 parts to this. First up, what we'll do is we will run a command to clear the PVID. Now, it's important that we got an LSPV beforehand and after. The reason being, we know that HDisks 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 pre-existed, which means 6, 7, 8, and 9 are the new ones. So we should only clear the PVID of the 4 new disks. So now we've done this, LSPV suddenly looks a lot safer, right? Our existing DB2 data currently up and running and in use is still there, but the 4 new disks that are actually exact copies have now been set to having no PVID. Now we're ready to actually recreate the volume group. So to recreate the volume group, we're going to use an AIX command called recreate VG. And I'm using the -y so that we can give it a name. If you don't, it will give it an automatically created name. Now, the only other thing we need to do here is type the HDisk numbers. Now, these are the same 4 HDisks that we just used. So 6, 7, 8, and 9. All right, so that ran relatively quickly, and what we've now got, hopefully, is a new volume group, DB2 create. And if I do an LSPV, I can see DB2 create here. And if I do a LSVGFS of DB2 create, I can see that it's created 2 file systems, FS DB2 data and FS DB2 log. So what I've now shown you is how I can effectively do the job of the connector, but do it manually. Now, importantly, if I do an unmount now from the Actifio desktop and tear those 4 disks away, what I don't do is remove the actual disks. So what I really need to do if I'm going to do an unmount is I need to take offline anything that I brought online, then do a vary off VG, and then do an export VG to make sure that I've completely removed my new volume group from the system. So now I should have 4 disks not doing anything. And one last thing to do, I need to actually remove the disks themselves. Now remember, if you're sitting there going, hey, this looks like manual work, I can get the connector to do this, okay? I'm just showing you how the connector did it and how I could manually do it instead. So what I should now have is all the constructs are gone. If I ran config manager, they'd come straight back. So what I should now do is go and do my unmount and delete. So we've now seen what the connector actually does for us, and we've now seen how we could reproduce the work of the connector manual.
Thank you for joining us for another YouTube Tech Tip video. If you like the content you're seeing on this channel, please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you will be alerted to any future content.